Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Banda Global Forum, where we have candid conversations about the most pressing global health issues facing our world today. I'm your host, Dr. Banda Khalifa. Today, I'm joined by a truly distinguished guest that I have known for a while. He was recently named one of Time's 100 most influential people in global health. Dr. Ndembi currently serves as the Deputy Director General and Head of Mission for the International Vaccine Institute, Africa Regional Office. He served as a Principal Advisor to the Director General of the Africa CDC, where he notably acted as Deputy Incident Manager for the continent's Mpox and Marburg preparedness and response efforts. He has dedicated his career to pandemic preparedness, vaccine development, and building robust public health systems, especially in Africa. He's also a pivotal leader and passionate advocate for mentoring the next generation of Africa health leaders. So in today's conversation, we are going to talk about the evolution of the Africa healthcare system and where we head from here. So without much ado, I'd like to invite our esteemed guest, Dr. Ndembi.
No, thanks so much, Dr. Banda, for inviting me. This is really a platform where we can have exchanges actually and be sure that we provide latest on the science and as well as really educating our own population. That's very important. The great job you've been doing, really being a connector in public health. That's absolutely important as we move forward in even just distilling right information, but also mitigating really disinformation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having to know you for this couple of years and knowing all the amazing things you're doing for the continent. So I usually like to start with your own journey, academic, career-wise, in academia, in public health. So where did all this begin and how did your journey evolve from early stages in your academic career to where you are now as the regional lead for IVI?
I think it's important, and this is a very strong message. I've been asked this question severally. There should be a drive, and it's important because in the current environment we are now in, you see probably people asking, we want to be like Dr. Banda. I can guarantee you, Dr. Banda, I know the kind of effort you're putting in terms of even the output we're seeing to be visible globally. I think I'm taking an example on you. I know how hardworking you are. But the point is, there should be a drive in each of us to take us where we have to be. First, you need to determine your own trajectory. What do I want to be? And that's a strong message for young researchers and scientists. I can guarantee you it has to take really dedication, effort, and be sure that something actually is driving every single day what you're doing. In my views, again, from my own experience, my driver has always been serving, at least global health in general, the health systems of the continent. Those days, getting well, really, I was really inspired. You can take it as an inspiration, watching a documentary from one of those really major outlets, those days, where we could actually see large really population of those infected with HIV not having access to treatment. It was quite shocking that at that time, really the continent, or most of those infected with HIV couldn't have access to antiretroviral. And the reason being, Dr. Banda, at that time, the belief was that African cannot keep to time, that the drugs having access to antiretroviral will be more detrimental in terms of resistance to antiretroviral, ensuring we have less option if there's a spread of HIV drug resistance globally. So my thing was, how do I, as a young scientist studying biochemistry and then specializing in molecular biology, could contribute to this? Lucky enough, I had a chance to apply to the Japanese scholarship. I think it's called, I'm sure it's still Mombu Gakuksho. And I applied to that scholarship, and I actually was successful and one of those Africans in those days And I was asked when getting my visa, what are you going to do in Japan? And I said, HIV. They said, no, there's no HIV in Japan. And I replied to the immigration officer, no, I'm going to study the technology there to bring it back to Africa to support how we can actually better treat HIV patient. And I was granted a visa. And it was already a challenge for me at that point that we need to learn how to make our case. If I was actually making the case for HIV, I was going to the wrong country because, in fact, there's little to learn from HIV in Japan those days. So, but the technology was there. The molecular biology, the best. When I'm talking to you about Dr. Banda, at that real-time qPCR was there already in Japan, but not ready probably in our continent. But again, we've learned those technologies. And then at those days, there were two options. Either continue with my postdoc, imagine in Japan, versus returning to Africa. I chose to return to Africa because my inspiration was I'm going to learn to bring it back to the continent to help the population on the continent. But again, it was quite tough. When I returned with all the knowledge, Dr. Banda, it wasn't an easy exercise. In Japan, when I placed my order for reagent to do my molecular studies, the following day, I get the reagent on the desk and I can continue my wet lab. But in Africa, my friend, it took me 3 months when I ordered for reagents, 6 months, if not, to get the same reagent I was getting in a week in Japan. But I can tell you, I actually asked myself, I'm not going to give up. And my first job with the Medical Research Council UK, instead of staying in Cameroon, where it's a lovely country and having all the challenges, I got a job to Uganda. I said, no, I can help the rest of Africa from Uganda, not necessarily from Cameroon. That's the second stop, Dr. Banda. You can help Africa wherever you are, not necessarily from your country. You can be in Baltimore, you can be in Boston, Bethesda, and still help your country and this lovely continent. So I took that first job and I was based at the Uganda Virus Research Institute in one of the top-notch labs. And then I'll give credit to two people here, Professor Pontiano Kalebu and Dr. John Kengason, that were encouraging me, you need to continue this. This is where you need to make an impact, not necessarily being in the US or being in Asia or whatever, but on the continent, training more Africans to be able to make up their dreams. So I'll stop here to say, Dr. Banda, your vision, what drives you, and again, what you really want to give back to this lovely continent is very important. You do it very well, Dr. Banda, and all what you do to be sure that Africa remains on the spot. But again, we need to bring that message to our young researchers and scientists. It's not an easy, really path or journey. As you see, you and myself will spend sleepless nights. People have to sacrifice certain things to get this done. But again, it has to come with a price in the end. Thank you, Dr. Banda, again.
Yes. That was such an insightful take on that. I can definitely understand most diasporans who even willingly want to go back to Africa. Most of the time, there's been a couple of times that they go, they assess the situation, and they realize that working in this environment is going to be really tough, and they give up. So having that persistency work in that environment is really crucial. But I want us I want you to give me your reflection on your recently being named on the Times 100 most influential in global health. When you saw your name on that list, how was it? Did you feel like everything is now, your work is now being recognized, or that recognition wasn't really a game changer in your eyes? How did you take that whole nomination?
Look, first, Dr. Banda, I would like first to start by I gave you a few names already of those that have accompanied me during this journey. Second, the collaborators. You can see you and myself, when we interacted the first time, it was really connected. We connected. I love working with people. I love really ensuring we build capability across the continent. That has been my leitmotif. When I saw it, to be quite honest, and I felt it's a good and very positive sign of the level of effort we're putting over years. And it's also a strong call to our younger generation that when you get things done, there's always a recognition. To be quite honest, it was to me either a satisfaction, but also a call to all of us that a single thing or a single achievement or whatever you do in your small corner, don't think that people are not watching.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
was the first message I got out of it, that, hey, it means that people are seeing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It means that all this work we've been doing, we've been making strong call to action for the pandemic preparedness, pandemic agreement. We have been making call of action to build a resilient health system across the continent. We made several calls when Dr. John Kengasong was leading the Africa CDC for health equity, ensuring that we have built system for the continent to respond to future pandemics, that we train people, we develop mechanism, alternative mechanism for sustainability across the continent, that people were watching me. To be quite honest, and watching us in general. That was first the thing, and then I reflected. I got it when I was in Korea, at HQ in Seoul, and I stopped again and say, again, what is really the message we need to take out of this nomination? Is that we need to continue to work hard, Dr. Banda.
Yeah.
We
Mm-hmm.
need to really continue to push and put in our best in what we're doing, wherever we are. Every single work we're doing, they're doing well. Let's continue to build networks. It's not easy, but we can make it. Thank you.
That's absolutely true. And I always say that no matter where you are, the corner that you think you're working, as long as you put in the effort, there are several people who are looking at you, who are watching what you're doing behind the scenes. They may not express it on the platforms or wherever, but when the time comes, they'll let you know that they've been watching you for a while. I want us to talk a little bit about the current state of the Africa health system in terms of pandemic preparedness. And I know you've worked in that domain for some time now. How would you evaluate Africa's overall preparedness when it comes to pandemics, and given the experiences we've had with previous episodes of pandemics? What do you think is the current state of Africa's readiness?
No, thanks again. This is a very important question. And I'll put three things first before I really go back to your question. I'll address your question. Three keywords here: resilience, sustainability, and the third point is really being sure that we have domestic resources. Those are the 3 points: resilience, sustainability, and health financing. Now, I think we have gone a long way. I think we have also learned in a very hard way.
Mm-hmm.
We have learned from Ebola outbreaks. We have learned from Mpox. We have learned from Marburg. I think you agree with me, Dr. Banda, that we have gone through cycles of challenges. One of those that I usually take as a good example is leveraging on existing investment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we need to actually move to. And that is linked to integration. So right now, you can see clearly, I'm sure you have a very deep experience on breadth of knowledge on this. Our countries are going in our health system is a bit moving in a very fragmented way. And this can be explained by several explanations on this. I'll tell you one thing. If you look at it from first the One Health perspective, you see the Minister of Health, they have a track. You see environmental, a track. Agriculture and those one animals, a whole track. When I say track, you see a ministry on their
Mm-hmm.
own driving a sector. Usually they don't talk among, there's no cross-talk or cross-fertilization. If even
Yeah.
there are cross-talks, they're really not that deep. You see what I mean? Because there should be a move on integration. I'll give you a case, very simple, before I move to the bigger one. Talk about cholera, which is a vaccine preventable disease. I think my brother, I think he has been there for centuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's quite unacceptable that we still have to deal with outbreaks of cholera in 20 member states. It's
Yeah.
painful. And the reason being because those who are tackling the health component of cholera, you can argue with me, you can talk about all the preventative measures, the vaccines, Minister of Health comes in. And then when we talk about now other component relating to water, sanitation and hygiene is another component. But the real issue on water is not Ministry of Health, right? It's somewhere else in other divisions or ministry. Now the issues of zoonotic sit somewhere. I think we need to break that silo, move with the One Health approach. That is first a systemic issue that we need to address in our health systems. I think it's important. Now, the second point is that we need to learn how to augment our capability as we move along on some of those outbreaks. What have we learned from the Ebola outbreaks in those days? We build infrastructure, we build skills, human capital development, laboratories. I think our ability to respond. It means that, and we responded efficiently. It means that outbreaks, we actually, cases subsided, we call off the outbreaks. It means that we've learned something out of it. Then comes COVID-19, challenges we have gone through. We know the systems that were built over time. We know the resources we have put in. It means that we shouldn't be where we left after COVID, right? It means that we should be ready to respond to any other forms of outbreak, more so for COVID, because all the 55 African Union member states were one way or the other affected with COVID. Means that a system was placed there to respond. That it means that at least we all learn and the lessons were there. And the lessons are really, we can put it on from the diagnostic perspective, from the national public health perspective, from the community health perspective, from actually capacity building perspective, to even human capital development perspective. I think the lessons are there. We've learned. I think we build systems. Now comes in Mpox. You can now ask me, do we have to go back from scratch to rebuild the system for Mpox? That is a very questionable, and that brings me to my point on resilience and sustainability. We should be augmenting capabilities. We know that we have to decentralize, for example, the surveillance and testing systems. Should we go back for Mpox with a centralized system? We know it doesn't work. Because you need to test at community level, where we know outbreaks start at community level and usually end at community level. It means that testing has to happen at community level, tracking at community level, intervention build to be able to really stop the spread or the network of transmission. But Dr. Banda, my point is, we have a lovely continent that always comes with innovative approaches when we are challenged, when we are pushed to the wall. We really like challenges. I think this is where my concern is, because during the peacetime, this is when we build systems. We don't wait when we are being challenged to build and sustain the investment. I give you a case. During lockdowns, you cannot imagine, Omicron was isolated in Africa. And we informed the rest of the world that there's a new variant. And this is during lockdown, when everyone was actually trying to resolve their own national issues. The continent really informed the world, hey, we have a new strain here. We need to have a new variant. These are Africans supporting each other within networks for it to happen during challenging situations. I think it's a lesson that we can do much better during peacetime. This is the continent during COVID where we're able to put system, the African Vaccine Acquisition Trust, where most of the African countries subscribe to. The African Medical Supplies Platform, where we all went there to acquire or procure the basic medical countermeasures for responses. This is the same continent where we all together under the leadership of Dr. Jem Kengason, immediately when the first case was reported, we had a continental strategy. It tells you a lot that when we are actually faced with challenges, we are more united. But that shouldn't be the case. Even in peacetime, we should be united. We should sustain the investment, the structure we're put in place to be able to respond to future pandemic. I think this is important, and those are the lessons. I'm sure the leadership as well, because in terms of really responses, you need strong leadership to take really the right decisions to be able to move some of those responses. But again, let me close by saying, regardless of the pandemic or the outbreaks, epidemic, we need strong policies.
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand the pathogens we're dealing with. We need strong partnerships because it's important. We need politics, how to navigate around this. I need to be well prepared so we're not caught by surprises. And that preparedness could be financial, really mechanism to respond to these kind of emergencies. I'm happy the Africa Epidemic Funds is coming through and others, but we need to fund those mechanisms to be able to be a reality, to be deployed in addition to other international mechanisms like the pandemic funds. Thanks, and back to you, Dr. Banda.
I think you've highlighted several key issues with respect to the current state of our health system. And you've also highlighted some gaps and lessons that we've learned in our handling of previous epidemics or pandemics. I want us to also look at something that has been central to the discussion within Africa member states. And I'll take even Ghana, for example. Ghana is earnestly looking forward to establishing a vaccine manufacturing unit or a vaccine manufacturing platform in Ghana. And I know you're currently working with the International Vaccine Institute. In your own assessment, what would you say is the latest update on Africa-led vaccine development efforts?
Thanks so much, Dr. Banda. I think your questions are really very sequential and very good for the flow. I think during COVID, and I'm really proud to say this because this is an initiative I was driving from the African Union, the Africa CDC. I was tasked by the director at that time, Dr. John Kengasong, to lead this. We did a very good landscaping, and we came to the realization, Dr. Banda, that Africa will only produce 1% of all the vaccines that are currently being administered on the continent. And this cut across diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccine that I mentioned. And this is quite a bit, it was quite shocking for all of us. But again, when it's shocking, you really have to get also some really measures and how to mitigate and probably move forward. So one of the things we did, these are the challenges. But how do we identify the enablers to be able to get at least to a certain point at some really down the road so that we get better prepared for the next pandemic? I think, again, the message here is that was the first time during COVID-19 that our head of state, through a mechanism, that is the Harvard mechanism I mentioned,
Yes.
through a very seasoned leadership, Strive Masiwa, Professor Benedict Orama, Dr. Vera Songwe, Dr. John Kengasong, the ministers of affairs from Egypt, from South Africa at that time. I think those top leaders really were brainstorming every single evening. It was really a learning experience to us getting into really the global health really space to see how leaders can brainstorm and ensuring that we have access, that there's equity. I think Africa can also be really around the table to discuss some, also have some conversation. We put the $2 billion Dr. Banda as a continent to really mobilize and make sure that we actually have access to the COVID-19 vaccines. And those leaders, I'm talking to, these are the seasoned diplomats and have really experts. We're going to get access to the vaccines. I mean, $2 billion US dollar. Look at the history of access, Dr. Banda. Either it's MERS, influenza, and other outbreaks. We never get these vaccines or supplies, usually, because we are going as really begging. You know, we're in a position of really making a conversation. You see, you and me, Dr. Banda, if you walk in the room, you are actually pleading, you're begging. It's different as you're saying, no, we have the money. We
Yes.
have
Yes.
access. Even with our 2 billion, we couldn't get access. It was a strong message that in a time of crisis, you really have to know your real partners. That in a time of crisis, you don't have to really be, you need to build and think efficiently how to build resilient system. It's a normal way of thinking because I've learned it that you often there's an analogy and something right when you listen, when you board on the flight, the security, when they say, the first thing is saying, when there's an emergency, you have to buckle up your, really? You attend first to yourself before you attend even to your neighbors, right? So it means that even in the case of emergency, those countries are first to be sure that they provide vaccines to their own population before not thinking of the global security, global solidarity. So, what is the message? We came to the realization that we need to build an ecosystem for local manufacturing across the continent. 1%, the target by 2030 is to have 30%. And the target by 2040 is to get 60%. But now, I think we are quite proud that there's a huge really movement and momentum. I'm quite happy when I see it because when you create a movement, as we created, you need to be sure that there's a momentum. Now, Dr. Banda, for the 8 enablers that were identified on the Continental Framework for Action, one, a market design and demand intelligence, meaning that the manufacturers, they're looking for volumes. Like you and myself, we think global health in terms of people. These are people who are thinking also global health in terms of business and sustainability because it's a private sector. This is a business and it's a very expensive business. So they need certainty on the volumes. How many doses of these vaccines that we want us to produce, if we produce, there will be a market. That's the way to look at it. That's the investment case.
Yeah.
That's again from the global security. You need to be sure the global and the business model will follow. But that commercial viable environment, again, based on the economy of scale, that if you produce a vaccine in Africa, will that vaccine be competitive on the global market? Because Ghana going to produce probably deck of Atlantic Science in Ghana will produce a Ebola vaccine. I'll give you a number. Let's say $5. And the global market maybe it's 50 cents. Who's going to buy procure vaccines of $5 against cents? Except if our government for health security putting money and say if it's 50 cents, we're putting 4.5 in there to cover it because we think it's important to support the local manufacturers. That is the question. Then the second point, you need a strong regulatory system. Is maybe DACO, the NRAs, the regulator in there can actually evaluate the product and say it's safe for Ghana, the African region, the West Africa region, and the rest of the continent. I mean, we have strong and very strong regulators to say the made in Africa vaccine can be also sent in the global market. That UNICEF, Gavi can procure the same vaccine. It's already happening for yellow fever produced for IPD. Means that we're doing that already for the past 8 years. That is the strong regulatory system. We have seen it is already happening. Most of regulators are getting to majority level 3. There is a strong reliance across the regulatory systems across the continent, which is the good news, Dr. Banda. Means that our product can be recognized globally. That the third point, you need a strong and robust research and development. I can tell you, we cannot move the needle from 1% to 60% by relying only on fill and finish, by not producing, by not funding research and development, science and innovation. You need to put money around the table. How do we support researchers across all universities across Africa, university in Ghana, or across West Africa, and across the region to be able to do research, really good research, top-notch research. You know very well researchers are involved in really high-quality research. I'll give you the malaria vaccines, for example. Most of the Africans were involved into that, which is a pride for Africa. I already mentioned the genomics earlier. So we do good research on the continent, but most of these are funded by partners. We need our government to put in resources across or on the table to move this agenda. We have Africa, really, Abuja, the many countries have actually met that target. This would have been a very good mechanism. As there's this global politics shift and the funding cut, this would have been a good backup, right? To really use those funds to really be sure we can actually reprioritize, but already there will be a funding mechanism in place at country level to address those challenges. Then we're not being cut by surplus. So we need financing. You need to fund. And you need to fund research and development. It's a very expensive business. So then after that, IP and tech transfer, you need to own this space. Because it's like, there's some, if you own the technology, you own the science. Because this is when things are actually happening. Because if you don't have it, you're going to be going out to negotiate the bargaining power. And some of these have expired and they can take up to 2050 before you get access to the technology. No, we shouldn't wait by 2050. We should get it now. And a good example, Dr. Banda, is the African biologic in South Africa. They're able to mimic something close to the Moderna vaccine. This is from Africa. This is why I'm proud to say we can do if we have the resources to do so. This is the African science behind cracking the code and ensuring that we have a good vaccine, the mRNA vaccine. That can be actually tech transfer to 6 hubs across the continent. Very important. Now, we need to train people with your caliber, Dr. Banda. We need to train Africans. We need to bring the African back from the diaspora back home. We call it reverse brain drain.
Yes.
And to reverse brain drain, get someone like Dr. Banda to be convinced to come. I know you will come back soon. You need to match the expectations. Someone trained in Canada, Montreal, whichever university there, earning, I'm giving you a figure, Dr. Banda, $10,000, the taxes there. Then I'm giving you 10,000 without taxes. They won't have 2 ways of thinking. Most of them will come back. They're back home, and the salary they have when they're going for that greener pasture. But again, it's not greener pasture. We have some need, my brother, across the continent. It's not just we have families to feed. So they are very good example. IPD, most of the talented guys that are working in the industry, bioprocessing, they are back home, provided to give them the minimum that is required for them to, I'll call it, survive. They're going to be there. Everyone wants to love to help this continent to thrive. But we actually, some of us and you, we are doing, it's not usually about salary, it's about something, our own vision and interest to this lovely continent, the Africa we love. Then when you have trained people, you have the environment for research and development. Why do you want them to leave the continent? Then you have infrastructure in place. Then you have the coordination. That's what the Africa CDC, Africa Union, EFC, and APAC, our continental agency, we want them to coordinate the partners to be sure that the ecosystem is built. And remember, in the 5 P's partnerships, it could be the European Union through MAF Plus, it could be the NIH, could be the Pasteur Networks, EDCTP, all the partners you can list, bringing all their own expertise, the Vaccine Institute, to be sure that we're successful in moving from 1% to 60%. You need strong partnerships in a very respected and oriented way. Because if you say cholera, let's fund cholera. If you say Marburg is a problem, Mpox is a problem, let's fund those ones. That IVI, and that's why we have an office in Rwanda, and the regional office in Rwanda, and the country office in Kenya. We have the expertise, Dr. Banda, across the value chain, from really surveillance to vaccine delivery, to support this ambition target of the African Union. As a good example, there are 2 vaccines we are working currently supporting BioVac in South Africa to really transfer the technology to BioVac in South Africa for cholera vaccine. This is drug substance. And this is going to be the second drug substance after 1930, after the yellow fever, to be done on the continent, actually from IVI to the manufacturer in South Africa called BioVac. Because we have observed a global shortage of cholera vaccines. And back to our point, these issues are on the continent. 15 member states, global shortage of cholera, We don't have the vaccine. We need the vaccine. I'm not saying it's only vaccines. They could be washed. We already talk about 1F, but the vaccines are important tools in the toolkit to address a response. You're one of the experts from WHO. You know very well. These are the toolkit. You need to have to test, and then you need to prevent through vaccination. You need to treat those who are infected. So if you don't have the vaccine, it means that your toolkit is not complete. So now, when by 2028, if everything goes well, Africa can now produce vaccines for the demand on the continent to meet the local demand, meet the global supply. This is going to be a game changer. And this is transformational. This is a partnership we're doing really to bring the expertise from East or from Seoul, from the global north to Africa. And this is what I love, Dr. Banda. Be an African contributing to really the ecosystem. The second now is Rift Valley with African biologics. In South Africa, again, you can argue why only South Africa, because the infrastructure is already ready.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you what is done next for us. So, Rift Valley, again, those are the diseases we deal with across Africa. These are diseases of interest for the continent. Those are two diseases, two pathogens, two antigens that we're working with a very good timelines that by 2028, Dr. Banda, I would love you to invite again to tell you that we're done. We have reached WHO PQ, and now the vaccine is been licensed, it's on the market, and now Africa is actually having access to the global market. We made in Africa vaccine. So globally, those are specific to IVI contribution. But now there's a good news for you, Dr. Banda. There are 25 active vaccine manufacturers on the continent, at least 25 projects from different manufacturers. And there are about really currently 8 antigens that are really to be ready to be manufactured in the pipeline by 2030. We're making good progress, Dr. Banda.
Yeah.
If the volumes are met, at least from fill and finish plus the drug substance I mentioned, I think we can meet some of the target by 2030. And with the only fear now is that we are overcapacitated so that we produce more than what we can consume, meaning that the work you're doing is important, that people are getting ready at community level to accept a vaccine made in Africa. We need to start this conversation now. Engage our regulators, engage with the National Immunization Technical Advisory Group, engage at community level. Hey, in the 2030, you might have a couple of vaccines that are made in Africa, not necessarily from the global north, from the multinational that we know. That is going to be transformational. And then that's going to be boosting the capacity of local manufacturers that will enable them really manufacture at scale for the pathogens of interest for this continent. So, to conclude on that question of what is happening on the continent, they are now based on the Tri-Part Africa CDC report funded by multiple partners. There are 3 segments. The first segment are countries that already have facilities. So we say facilities for manufacturing, GMP facility, and they have tech transfer agreement in place. You are talking of IPD in Senegal. You're talking of Egypt with the Vaxeras, the light of generic plant there. You have South Africa, I mentioned already, and you have our colleagues that are currently ready in Morocco. That's the first segment. They are ready to go. And they have the antigen that I mentioned earlier, at least for and IPD. Then the second segment are those that have the facility and they're actually working on tech transfer and IP. There's a long list there, including our brothers from Ghana, including those from Rwanda and so on, ready to be able to kickstart anytime from now. And then those that are actually aspiring with project are working on. Again, really, there's a huge, I'm talking of 25 projects. So it means that we can get things done if you have resources, if you have the human capital development, and if you really invest into this current vaccine manufacturing space. Thank you.
I think that there's a lot to there, and I can see progress that has been going on for some time with respect to even personal development, the strategies to retain professionals, training the next generation, and also making sure that are actually committing to those initiatives. Thank you for highlighting all those advancements. It feels know that these are in place, and then able to boast or to showcase that we are also front runners when it to vaccine and biologics development. But before we conclude, I want you to briefly talk future of Africa public health, especially retreat of US from several developmental organizations and support for some initiatives in Africa. How do you see this shift affecting the continent? And you could also add the AI evolution in public health and how it's getting ready to harness those.
No, I think this is a very good question. For me, it's the time. And you observe we are very optimistic people that you can turn challenges into opportunities. That's the way I see it. What does that mean? This is the time now to reflect on how we prioritize resources. We need to reprioritize. We need to integrate. We started our conversation around that. Integrations is important. That will cut significantly some of the waste, because it's important. If the malaria program we're doing using one platform, the same platform can be used to do HIV, can be used to do Mpox, can be used to be used to do Marburg, and so on. So we need to integrate and leverage on existing resources and platforms that are currently existing to be able to minimize those waste. That will save costs quite significantly. So now we need to really, in my views, really call for an Africa summit on health financing. That's important because this is not going to be just a bilateral. It's going to be more deeper than that. How do we work together during across the regional economic blocks to be sure we remove some of the bottlenecks? This is time to really have seamless processes across the region and ensuring that we minimize and work efficiently and optimize the use of resources. The other point, very important also from the donor perspective, we need to start really thinking how we align with the donors. How do we work collectively? I can tell you, Dr. Ban, based on my experience, and not only one or two countries, that you end up with institutions that are working on the project. Next door, you have another institution working on the same project. The institution next door, nearby, I mean, they are shipping samples somewhere. The institution next door is actually doing the same experiment using their own platform funded by the other funders. I think because we don't share information,
Yeah.
we don't talk among ourselves, we don't disseminate, we're not putting out there what we do. Having an asset of what is being done at continental level, so that people can leverage on network, ensuring that we get things done collectively. On that point, from Japan. Japan is it's a high income country.
Yeah.
In those, it's almost 22 back. There was a single lab doing the genomics. You just have to book. If you want to use the next gen sequencer of the qPCR, you just go in the room and you book and get your experiment schedule for that particular hour, and everyone will abide to it based on that scheduling. You cannot afford to have 5 institutions with next generation sequencer. This is not the way we need to. We need to start thinking, working as that would then cost the investment and be more competitive on the global, really, in attracting more funds in the future. So I think that is number one, really breaking that silo in which you have been in for years, and building networks of networks means that the investment that have been done over years, how do we leverage to sustain them? And be sure, again, my point to domestic financing, be sure that government put money to be sure we sustain some of those investments. So, and then that comes in artificial intelligence. It's going to be useful in terms of ensuring that we use those tools. But again, Dr. Banda, we call it responsible use of artificial intelligence. But we want to be very, very, very specific on that. responsible use. Because there's now on the regulation of artificial intelligence. There are pros, really. We all agree we need to really bring in artificial intelligence into play. I can give an example. You know very well, with your experience and breadth and knowledge there, they are alone. And WHO and other partners are reporting more than 180 outbreaks every single year. You know the reason: global warming, and so on, that climate change happening, increasing really the spread and the reoccurrence and occurrence of some of those diseases. You agree that with the resources allocated to some of the continental agencies, they cannot be everywhere. It means that we need to think of the best way to use artificial intelligence to really come to play here in disease attribution and so on. That you can find a better way to see and predict how often you're going to experience outbreaks of chikungunya, of Lassa fever, of cholera outbreaks, and helps you really tailor your intervention. So you're not everywhere in the 55 countries, but you know that we can repurpose on pivot and put in really sure the next outbreaks of chikungunya going to be in Kenya. Then what do? The rapid responders ready, the resources ready, the vaccines ready, to be sure that we can deploy them time and be sure we can run clinical trials, be sure that before actually the cases will subside. I mean, this is important. One of those things that I take example is Ebola outbreak in Uganda. And we wrote a good paper with you on mpox. There are some ecological predictor that can predict the occurrence of mpox. We know that is one seasonal, one animal disease happens usually during the seasons. But why don't we get ready? Even stockpiling of some of those vaccines. We just get ready. Say, we know it happens every August, and this is it. Every 5 years. So the stockpile is there, ready to deploy them. But we're always caught, Dr. Banda, by surprises. And we come there with the vaccines when it's done, and then we say now, okay, now the cases, no more cases. Then you cannot the people, and that's a waste, because take advantage of every single outbreak to build the science around it, learn from it, and then move on. All this can only be done through artificial intelligence. I think this is important. And to close on that one, Dr. Banda, during COVID, we already started implementing artificial intelligence. There was a good project. My first project proposal when as a chief science officer, when I joined Africa CDC, was a project on actually tracking cases of mpox, of COVID through mobile applications. It was quite interesting. Now, if you put in all the regulatory barriers, you are not actually interfering in people's life. The point is that if you have cases in a region, you can track where the positive cases are moving, migrating, and within the community. Then you deploy your intervention where more cases are being actually reported. You bring in your case, you deploy the community health workers, you deploy the resources, all the tools to be able to stop the spread. We use it during COVID. Use it. It's already been on the Africa CDC website. It's already been happening. The point is that, as I've said, it should be a responsible use of artificial intelligence. To close again, if you look at the ratio, epidemiologists by 100,000 population of 200,000, it's very low. Yeah. We are still below the standard. Means that we can leverage on artificial to close that gap on human skills and capital development to be able to address some of those human capital skills and challenges as part of the Africa Union, Africa CDC pillar on the new public health order, which is our skills to be able to respond to future outbreaks. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's been like most young professionals or even on the continent would really learn a lot from our conversation and knowing exactly what's going on the ground, because oftentimes people feel Africa is stagnant. But in my last couple of weeks, I've spoken to a couple of people who like really brought me up to date with what is actually on the continent. So thank you for engaging us. But before you usual for your final message to our listeners and also especially to emerging African leaders in public health, what last message would you leave with apart from coming back home to work?
That's very interesting. To be quite honest, my first, you and myself, we have that task, Dr. Banda, is to ensure that we pass on a very strong, positive message for the continent. That's the only way we attract more. This is a lovely continent, 1.5 billion people. And if you look at the fastest growing economy in the world, some actually are on the continent, right? My message here is really one, we need to really encourage the generation, the young scientists to put in their best. The future is in Africa. The future, I repeat it, is in Africa. I repeat it again, the future is in Africa. So we cannot do that without investing in the future of this continent, our youth, the younger population. Africa actually has the youngest population in the world. And Dr. Banda, without the jollof and Ghana jollof rice and conversation, we didn't come there. But I can guarantee you, Nigeria has the highest birth cohort after China and India.
Yeah.
Meaning that in terms of volumes, if you manufacture, we have really countries that, when I say birth cohort, I mean that if you look childhood immunization, the number of vaccines that children are going to down, you see a bit of translation. 250 million people, and the highest birth cohort. I'm talking about volume and market that can really drive. So we have a huge potential. You have done your exercise and done very well on the startups across the continent. So that there's a future, just to say there's a future there, we need to really brand properly the continent. And let's be ready, Dr. Banda, to take our first vaccines made in Africa, if not the second after yellow fever. I'm going to review when we get it, so we get a shot in 2030 for those vaccines and say, all of us, let's be together for a continent. So thank you so much for inviting me again. And again, thanks for this great job you've been doing. It's very important. People listen to you. And let's keep spreading the good news. And I'm sure I want to see you on the top 100 more influential people in the next ones. I'm going to advocate for it. Thanks so much, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been my absolute pleasure to you and to learn all the amazing things you've been doing. I know how passionate you are about training the next generation of public health professionals. And most times people reach out to me, how can they get involved? And I'm like, go on LinkedIn and search, Professor Ndembi and connect with him. He has of networks that he'll be able to, align your interests with others. Provided your intention is mainly so. I truly appreciate all you're doing for the continent. Thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, we'll keep challenging, we'll keep leading, and we'll stay focused. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.